So our recording has started today, and I would like to go ahead and introduce today's speaker, Kayla Fisher. So Kayla Fisher, just for a little bit of background, is a registered dietitian, and she's worked at UF Health Jacksonville for over 7 years. She completed her postgraduate work and dietetic internship at Mayo Clinic, Jacksonville. Kayla works in an outpatient clinic, educating and counseling patients with many different chronic diseases. I'm going to go ahead and hand the presentation off to Kayla just to say hello before we go ahead and kick off her anti-inflammatory discussion for today.
Hi there. Thank you, Natalie. I'm not certain if everyone can see me the way our webinar is set up or not, but if you can, it's lovely to meet all of you. Happy to be here. As Natalie said, my name is Kayla Fisher. I am a registered dietitian here at UF Health Jacksonville and very excited for this. So as we go through, if you guys have questions that come up, just like Natalie said, send them in through chat or Q&A. And then we should have plenty of time at the end of this presentation to get through a good amount of those questions. I know that nutrition is so individualized. I say that in the presentation. You'll probably hear me say it 5 more times while we answer questions. So it's very individualized. There aren't a lot of one-size-fits-all answers, but I will do my best to get questions answered in a way that is most helpful to you guys. So happy to be here.
All right, thank you again for that introduction, Kayla. And you can see, again, if you're not able to see the video today, that's just depending on the selections that you've chosen in your Zoom toolbar. So toggle around with those if you'd like to see that portion of things when we get back to the discussion. Otherwise, here's Kayla. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation today. So bear with me while I end this screen share and begin our presentation.
Hello, my name is Kayla Fisher, and today we'll be discussing the anti-inflammatory diet for pain management. This is part of the Aging and Integrative Pain Assessment and Management Initiative here in Northeast Florida. So as I said, my name is Kayla Fisher. I'm a registered dietitian, and I've worked at UF Health Jacksonville for almost 7 years now. I did my dietetic training at Mayo Clinic here in Jacksonville, and I work in an outpatient clinic providing medical nutrition therapy. So like I said, today we're going to talk about the anti-inflammatory diet and the role that it can have in managing pain. But we have to start with what is inflammation. So inflammation is our body's natural response and protection against many dangers like bacteria, irritants, trauma. Typically, it expresses itself as swelling, redness, heat, or pain. And over time, it can lead to long-term problems, as well as impact a number of chronic diseases, including chronic pain. Well, what is the role of lifestyle therapy? We know lifestyle therapy can include anything from stopping smoking, eating healthier, getting to a healthy body weight, physical activity, our sleep, and our stress. And focusing on these lifestyle therapies has also been shown to help improve chronic pain symptoms, especially back pain, inflammation, and our ability to move about through our day-to-day lives. A healthy diet can support weight loss and help manage pain. Physical activity or exercise also supports weight loss. If we're not active, that can make pain worse. So activity actually helps to decrease our pain. If we're carrying around excess weight, that can also increase pain as well as complicate other chronic diseases such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And research has shown there are proven changes we can make toward improving our pain and our overall health that are possible for everyone. So that's what we want to focus in on today. And that's where our diet comes in. Research has shown that an anti-inflammatory diet can absolutely reduce pain, inflammation, and stiffness caused by different conditions, especially arthritis and musculoskeletal pain. So what is an anti-inflammatory diet? Well, I want to be clear that even though we're using the term diet, it's not a diet in the way we often think of dieting, but we are calling this an anti-inflammatory diet in the sense that it's how we should be eating. It's an overall healthy eating pattern. An anti-inflammatory diet encourages whole foods, real foods, over processed foods or packaged foods. So think about something like eating a real apple instead of applesauce or apple juice. It's rich in plant foods. Those would be our fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, whole grains, and healthy fats like avocado or olive oil. And it limits our added sugars, processed oils, red meat, and processed meats like bacon and sausage. There's many other health benefits besides just pain management. So an anti-inflammatory diet has also been shown to help control blood sugars, blood pressure, cholesterol levels, and overall health. Food can certainly have an impact on inflammation in our body, both in a positive way and a negative way. So we like to think of some of these foods as anti-inflammatory and some as pro-inflammatory. Pro-inflammatory foods are going to be foods that research has shown us worsen inflammation or trigger inflammation in the body. These are going to be sugar-sweetened beverages, and by that I mean sodas, juices, sweet tea, Gatorade, lemonade, fruit punch, any sugary drinks. Added sugars and refined carbs. So cookies, candies, cakes are sweets, as well as refined carbs like white bread, white crackers, chips, Cheetos, often those packaged convenient foods. Processed meats are considered pro-inflammatory and would include bacon, sausage, bologna, cold cuts, as well as solid fats, trans fats, and many of our processed vegetable oils. So these would be things like butters and margarines, as well as the soybean oil that shows up in most boxed and processed snack foods. Fried foods are certainly pro-inflammatory. We want to avoid those. And dairy has a question mark because it's a little bit controversial. We'll come back to that one later. Anti-inflammatory foods are going to be the foods that we just discussed eating more of. Vegetables, fruits, whole grains, or intact grains, meaning things like oatmeal, brown rice, quinoa, as well as legumes or beans, nuts and seeds, healthy fats like olive oil or avocado, fresh herbs and spices, and plenty of water, making sure we stay hydrated. Here's a visual highlighting just a few of those really healthy anti-inflammatory foods, although there are more, as well as some of the pro-inflammatory foods at the bottom that we're going to want to eliminate or at least cut back on. Fried foods, sodas, processed meats. So let's focus on a few key points. More fruits and vegetables. It is as simple as it sounds. We want to try to eat vegetables and fruits with every meal, aiming for 5 to 9 servings daily, which does sound like a lot. Keep in mind that some large pieces of fruit would count as 2 servings. Fresh or frozen fruits and vegetables would be ideal when that's possible, but we have to be realistic. So if we do need to do some canned vegetables, the best thing I can recommend is look for the ones that are low sodium or salt free. You can also rinse those off before you eat them or cook them to decrease the sodium intake. So fresh or frozen when we can. These fruits and veggies provide antioxidants, fiber, as well as vitamins and minerals to our body. If we want to know the best fruits and vegetables for an anti-inflammatory diet, we want to focus in on leafy greens like spinach. Broccoli is a great one, and then berries. Next, we want to make sure we're consuming healthy fats. You might have heard of omega-3 fatty acids. So these are one of our healthy fats. Our healthy fats are unsaturated fats. So these are things like olive oil, nuts and seeds, avocado, chia, and flax seeds. Our unsaturated fats tend to come from plant foods, and they've been shown to have many benefits, both to reduce inflammation, but also to keep our heart healthy. So not all fat is bad. It's the type of fat that matters. Our saturated fats have been shown to promote inflammation. So these are the ones we want to limit or avoid. Saturated fats are solid fats at room temperature, like butter. They tend to come from animal fats. So whole milk, ice cream, butter, the fat that's in red meat, the fat that cooks off of like beef when you cook it, bacon, sausage, processed meats. This is a reason we want to avoid them. And then we want to limit our use of vegetable oils like soybean oil. We won't go into all the research for today's presentation, but there's some research to show that if we're consuming too many of those processed vegetable oils, which provide omega-6 fatty acids, and we're not consuming enough omega-3 fatty acids, the ratio gets thrown off and the wrong ratio can promote inflammation. So the takeaway message is to focus on the omega-3 fatty acids, healthy plant fats, and try to limit the processed foods in general. Choose whole grains. So whole grains or intact grains are going to be less processed. This means that they maintain more of their fiber and other nutrients like important minerals. Whole grains would be foods like oatmeal, quinoa, brown rice, whole grain bread or crackers if you are going to consume those, whole grain pastas. I always like to mention, depending on your other health conditions, the portions you should consume of these foods or the frequency could vary. So, someone who has diabetes may need to be a little more mindful of the grains they consume compared to someone who does not. So, just please keep that in mind when you listen to today's presentation, that it's not specific to your own individual medical history, but just addressing general healthy eating as part of an anti inflammatory diet. Okay. Okay, so then the grains and starches we want to avoid are going to be the refined ones. And by refined, we usually mean highly processed, which takes away some of the fiber and nutrients. So these are things like white breads, biscuits, pastries, bagels, chips, crackers, muffins, baked goods, sugary cereals, white rice, white pasta. There's a lot of them. And I highly recommend that we cut them out or cut way back. You may be surprised at the impact that this category has on your pain as part of an anti-inflammatory diet. The typical American diet is certainly consuming too many of these refined grains and starches. As part of that, we recommend that you avoid added sugars. So notice that we do draw a distinction between added sugars and naturally occurring sugars. Some foods, like fruits that are healthy foods, do have natural sugars in them. And those impact our body very differently than some of these added sugars we're consuming in such excessive amounts. So whenever you look at a food label, pay attention. Most of the newer food labels will show you the difference between added sugars and the sugars that are already in the foods. It's the added sugars that we really want to target and cut back on as part of an anti-inflammatory diet. Too much sugar can contribute to inflammation and obesity, which are very connected in many people's bodies. So cutting back on sugared drinks, soda, juice, sweet tea, sports drinks, lemonades, cookies, candies, cakes, ice cream, all those sweet foods will certainly help here. But I do encourage you to read those food labels because some other foods, such as granola bars, that we think of as healthy foods, tend to have quite a bit of added sugar. So look at those food labels. Keep in mind, when some foods are made to be low sugar foods, fat-free foods, a lot of the labels that we'll see promoting health, often whatever is taken out is just replaced with something else. So sometimes our sugar-free foods will have artificial sweeteners instead. Sometimes our fat-free foods will have more sugar added to maintain the taste, which is one of the reasons that the anti-inflammatory diet doesn't focus as specifically on these nutrients on a food label as a general pattern of eating that focuses on whole, real foods like fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, whole grains, and really encourages us to limit the processed foods. The processed foods, frozen meals, frozen TV dinners, cookies, chips, candies, and cakes are where we find the sugar, the processed fats, the sodium all together. So I like to reinforce that. It's one of my number one takeaways. If we avoid the processed foods, a lot of this fixes itself. Okay, a couple more things we want to touch on. So less red meat or processed meats. These also have been shown to be pro-inflammatory. So we want to avoid or limit, at least cut back on red meat like beef and burgers, processed meats like bacon, sausage, corn dogs, bologna, cold cuts. Try to avoid or limit your fried meats. Instead, we should focus on healthier, leaner proteins such as fish, especially fatty fish like salmon, get those omega-3s in, skinless chicken, eggs, and then also plant proteins like beans, nuts, peanut butter, tofu. These can be excellent sources of protein that are also anti-inflammatory, or at least don't promote the inflammation in the body. So let's come back to dairy. Dairy is a little bit controversial. There's research that you can interpret both ways. So some suggest avoiding it, while others would say it's a nutritious food group. My recommendation is that you certainly avoid dairy that is high in fat or sugar, such as whole milk, ice cream, cream cheese. However, I do think that dairy that provides us protein and probiotics, such as Greek yogurt or low-fat cottage cheese, can certainly be included in an anti-inflammatory diet. For many people, this is a great way to get in probiotics, which actually help us keep a healthy gut or a healthy microbiome, which also plays an important role in controlling inflammation in the body. To kind of bring this all together for us, if you're looking for a specific diet or eating pattern to follow that is anti-inflammatory, I'd recommend you look more into the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet is proven to be one of the healthiest diets we know of, both for the prevention of chronic disease as well as the management of chronic disease. It is certainly anti-inflammatory. The way that the Mediterranean diet works, if you look at this food pyramid in front of you, is the foods that are in the bottom of the pyramid are the foods we should be eating the most of. So these are plant foods: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, olive oil, beans, nuts, legumes, and seeds. These foods should be incorporated into every single meal we eat. Add a fruit, add some vegetables, use beans as your protein. That should be the majority of our diet. The next step up is fish and seafood. So remember, try to eat fish more often. Try not to fry it. Focus on those healthy fats that we get from some of our fatty fish. The next step up the pyramid incorporates lean chicken, poultry, eggs, and yogurt. So we can have these in moderate amounts, maybe once daily. That could be an egg with breakfast. That could be chicken for dinner, or maybe Greek yogurt as a snack. And you'll see up at the very top of the pyramid, it says less often. So this is red meat and sweets. Just as we've discussed with the anti-inflammatory diet, the Mediterranean diet is very limited in the amount of red meat, sweets, and added sugars we consume. You can absolutely avoid these completely if that's something that feels doable for you. And finally, you'll notice that the Mediterranean diet is built upon a foundation of physical activity. We have to talk about physical activity as part of lifestyle therapy because physical activity helps maintain health in our body, and it's also been shown to help manage pain. So, as I said, research shows physical activity can manage many health conditions. It's been shown to decrease pain for those with osteoarthritis, improve many chronic diseases, can also improve flexibility, healing, and reduce stiffness. How do we get in more activity? Whether you like to think of it as just moving more, being more active, or exercising, we do encourage you to make it a priority to get daily movement. We typically recommend that you start with a goal, ultimately that your goal be getting up to at least 30 minutes a day, but we want you to start wherever you are. If that's 5 minutes a day, start there and build up. Keep in mind, your exercise can be broken down into many workouts. So you could do a 10-minute walk in the morning, a 10-minute walk at lunch, and a 10-minute walk in the evening, and still achieve that goal of 30 minutes of activity a day. Just look for small, fun, creative ways to add more movement. So walking a dog, going for a walk with a friend, walking during commercials of your favorite TV show. You can try a new form of exercise, something like yoga or Tai Chi. I often encourage my patients to check YouTube for free exercise videos. If you like dance exercise, if you like stretching, if you want a group to do it with, there are many groups out there. If you have Medicare, you can access their Silver Sneakers benefit. So there's a lot of ways to do this. It does not have to be traditional exercise or going to a gym, but we do want to encourage you to think of ways to start increasing your daily movement, as that plays a very important role, both in your general health, but also to manage pain and incorporate that as part of a Mediterranean or anti-inflammatory diet. That's our conclusion for what we would talk about today. Lifestyle therapy can, of course, encompass other topics, such as getting enough sleep or managing stress. Today, we've really focused in on the anti-inflammatory diet and physical activity. If this presentation has brought up questions for you, feel free to reach out to your coordinator or someone involved with the program, and we'll be happy to get you those answers. Otherwise, we wish you all the best.
All right, so as I transition us back over to our Q&A slide, I know we've had a couple of questions that have come up already. So I am working on navigating us over there. All right. So Kayla, we can go ahead and have you come back and join us. So if anyone did pop in kind of partway through or anything like that, I'm just your moderator. And then Kayla is our dietitian today. So if you've joined even part of our presentation, it's time for our discussion and Q&A. So if thoughts have come up, if you just had something in mind even before you joined us today that maybe piqued your interest, you can go ahead and use the Q&A feature. You can use the chat box. All of those are in that black toolbar on your Zoom toolbar screen. And then I do have a couple of questions already that we can address. So hello again to Kayla, and thank you all for joining us today. All right, so the first question that we have that came in is a discussion about the types of oil. So canola versus olive oil and beyond. So can you talk a little bit about the types of oils maybe that someone should consider as the top option for cooking, for baking, that kind of thing?
Definitely. This is a great question. I actually love this question. So to start off with healthiest oils, and then we'll talk a little more about kind of ranking them in different purposes. I would recommend olive oil, number one, hands down, when you can use it, both for the anti-inflammatory diet and just general health. And this is for a few reasons. So olive oil is predominantly monounsaturated fats. And you've probably heard it mentioned in the presentation, the unsaturated fats are the fats that have been shown to have health benefit, especially cardiovascular benefit, monounsaturated kind of being the best. So for that reason, I always recommend olive oil first. Also, we have by far the most research to show benefit from olive oil. There is other research out there. Coconut oil, vegetable oils, canola oil. A lot of nutrition research can be very gray, but with olive oil, it is clear. The research is there, especially through the Mediterranean diet, that it has just general benefits. So that's my number one. Now, the only thing about olive oil is, with oils, there's something that we call like a smoke point. So different oils can be heated to different temperatures before the chemical bonds essentially start to break down. Olive oil cannot get as hot as some of our other vegetable oils. And this is why olive oil is not used for our fried foods, especially. That's a good thing. We don't want a lot of the fried foods, but I just like to mention that because, you know, a style, hopefully we're not frying as much, but a style of cooking where you're maybe trying to do a pan fry, you know, not a deep fried choice. I've had patients or clients who think, oh, well, I'll just switch to olive oil and it's not going to go well. So olive oil can't be used for that. If you need an oil for that, I would say in that situation, canola would be better than the rest of the vegetable oils that we think of. Think of the ones that come in the big bottles and they're liquid at room temperature. Canola oil, the one that says vegetable oil, there's often like soybean oil. I would recommend canola over those. And that is because canola oil does have more omega-3s, whereas the vegetable oil, soybean oil, corn oils are very high in the omega-6 fatty acids. And I'm not going to go fully into that unless we have time and someone wants that as a question, but I'll just mention that there's a lot of research to show we get too many omega-6s and not enough omega-3s, and we don't want that ratio to be too skewed. So if you have to, I would choose canola oil over those. I don't know how far I should go here because I'll just mention it. And if someone wants it, it's your teaser. You can ask me a question about coconut oil, but that's all I'll say. So olive oil would be my number one recommendation. Did I answer that question? I guess Chuck can't respond to me.
Yeah, Chuck will let us know, but I think that covers it very thoroughly.
Okay,
we'll go ahead and move into our second one. So from Christine, when you mentioned tuna, let's talk about canned tuna. So if you can't get a hold of fresh tuna, and then there's frozen tuna and there's canned tuna, what's going on with tuna?
Absolutely. Canned tuna is a fantastic option for so many reasons. One, it's much more affordable, going to keep for a long time. Canned tuna is a great source of protein. We still get the benefit of it. It's actually one of my most recommended cheats. Only things I would say to think about are when you're choosing your canned tuna. This lines up with your other health goals. So you can either look for the canned tuna that's in water, or there are a couple brands that put it in olive oil. The olive oil in the canned tuna is going to add a few calories from the fat. So again, as long as that fits with your other health goals, it's great to have the extra olive oil. I feel comfortable with those. I would avoid ones that are canned in other oils. And then I would just take a glance at the food label to look at the sodium. So a lot of canned tuna is relatively low sodium. It's a great choice. When you get into some of the flavored tuna packets, that's where we'll sometimes see quite a bit of sodium added. So just glance at those. Otherwise, I would keep it as a pantry staple. And I would even consider the canned salmon as a similar function. Whether you can make salmon salad like tuna salad. You can make, salmon burgers as you would tuna burgers, all kinds of things you can do. So thumbs up to both of those.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And then our next question, which we will definitely send out links already, but they're just asking in general, is there a good website for Mediterranean diet recipes? I know we use a lot of the federal website. The USDA one is really good and it's pretty diverse, super easy to navigate. I don't know if you have suggestions or we can simply pop that into the email.
Yep, and we'll send those links. So Old Ways, OLDWAYS is a fantastic resource. They put out a lot of information and recipes on the Mediterranean diet specifically. Also, Natalie, please correct me if I shouldn't say this. I'm not plugging an organization, but I tell all people everywhere. Mayo Clinic essentially has their whole cookbook online for free, which is just a great resource. Their recipes are all analyzed by dietitians, which you can access just with Googling Mayo Clinic healthy recipes. Forgive me if I'm not supposed to say organizations.
No. I think that's great. Mayo has a great public website. So I definitely encourage people to look at that. They have done a great job with that. Very thorough. And moving into our next one. So can you recommend any exercises or maybe where to get started for rheumatoid arthritis? Do you have any resources? Again, we can add these as links.
That's a fantastic question. I'm going to be somewhat cautious with my answer just because specific exercise is not within my area of expertise. But what I recommend most often is physical therapy is often a covered benefit that is underutilized. And so the first place I would suggest starting would be maybe just asking your family, your primary care provider, your family medicine provider for a referral. And even if you went to see a physical therapist for a couple sessions, they would really be able to sort of prescribe exercises that help you the most and are the safest for you. So I don't feel that I have any I can really share today, but that would be my number one go-to resource for exercise.
Perfect. Thank you. And we'll add some of those links into the emails too. That's a little bit easier to navigate that way. So our next one is, can you address the non-carb diet versus the anti-inflammatory diet? What are similarities and differences there?
I think so. And Sherry, if there's a way for you to type again to clarify, that would be helpful. By non-carb, I'm assuming you mean very low carb, or clarify for me if you specifically mean more the keto diet, because I know that's very popular right now. But I'll do my best to answer. So they are actually quite different. And there is a purpose potentially for both, but I would just say, as you think about what we talked through today, then the anti-inflammatory diet is not low in carbs because a lot of our anti-inflammatory foods come from plant foods, and plant foods inherently have carbohydrates. We will not find plant foods that don't. So fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts and seeds, even our really healthy whole grains, all of these foods contain some amount of carbohydrates. And we need them for the benefits they provide. So on the other hand, often a no carb or a very low carb or similar to a ketogenic diet is going to be a little bit contradictory, because some foods such as avocado might be allowed in that. And that does have some overlap where it has anti-inflammatory benefits. But typically those diets are much more meat heavy or meat centric. So if we're eating a lot more meats, cheese, animal fats, I don't personally recommend that. I'll just be honest. And that's just my personal opinion as a dietitian. Again, there may be very specific individual instances where that is appropriate, but in general, they're a little bit contradictory. So if someone wants to go lower carb, I think there's a lot of benefit to that. The typical person is over consuming carbs, but especially focus in on the type of carb. So cutting out carbs completely may not be necessary, but maybe we need to really cut back the refined carbs, the processed carbs, and focus on getting carbohydrates from lots and lots of vegetables, nuts and seeds, and maybe fruits and whole grains in small amounts. That would be an example of a way to go lower carb, but still maintain your intake of some of these anti-inflammatory plant foods. If there are further questions from that, please text or chat and I can elaborate, but I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I'll respond as well to the other question on that. Moving a little bit into nightshades. I believe these all fall into nightshades. So eggplants, tomatoes, peppers, and solanine. I'm not butchering that word, containing
nope,
plants. Can that aggravate inflammatory conditions such as arthritis? What's your thoughts on that? Or what's the understanding generally in the dietary world?
And I am going to just pause to clarify, because I am seeing some then feedback come in the chats. Do I need to worry about addressing those as we go, or can I just completely listen to you, Natalie, and you've got it all covered?
Yep, I'll follow along with the order of everything if you want to start with the nightshades, and we'll go.
Perfect. Okay, great question. So first, I will say that is a common, you will see that. It's common information out on a lot of internet websites. Second, I will say the research really isn't there. So that kind of answers it for me. Even before today's talk, I was actually double checking some of the research because I thought this question might come up. There is not research that clearly shows us nightshade vegetables trigger or worsen inflammation. Now, solanine, which is in these vegetables, is something that it's possible some individuals have a sensitivity to. So my takeaway would be, if you feel personally that when you eat these nightshade vegetables, which the most common are eggplants, tomatoes, peppers, white potatoes are another. If you feel when I eat these foods, I feel worse, or, I have some kind of a flare, my arthritis pain is worsened by it, there is no harm in you choosing to avoid them. So it's very individualized for any of us. If we find that certain foods worsen our symptoms, I would say, sure, avoid them. But for the general person who maybe is able to eat those foods and typically feels fine and just wonders, oh no, should I avoid them? My answer would be no, just based on current research. I would not stress over that. I would focus more on the known causes of inflammation that we discussed today, like added sugars, processed meats, red meats, and alcohol is another one that should be mentioned. I'm sure I will get a question now that I said that.
Thank you. I think that covers that one. Can you talk a little bit about gluten and its effects on inflammation? Specifically, they're asking about fibromyalgia, but just in general, gluten and carbs we've been talking about.
Yes. So my answer is going to be fairly similar actually to the nightshade question, in that research is quite clear. It's not an across the board gluten worsens inflammation relationship. We do not have an established relationship there. Now, I would mention, follow me here, that gluten should strictly be avoided in the case of a diagnosis of celiac disease. Celiac disease is an autoimmune disorder. Rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disorder. Research does show us, we know, that individuals who have one autoimmune disorder are more prone or more at risk for other autoimmune disorders. So could there be a connection for some individuals who have rheumatoid arthritis specifically, or an autoimmune condition, that gluten aggravates those symptoms? Yes, but across the board, gluten does not need to be avoided for fibromyalgia or arthritis or pain in general, unless you have been diagnosed with celiac disease or specifically feel when I eat gluten, I have some kind of a worsening of pain or a flare. The last nuance I will say is, well, where do we find gluten? So gluten is a wheat protein. That means that it's in some really healthy foods like whole wheat items. But that also means that because it's a wheat protein, it is in all of those processed refined carbs, muffins and cakes and, boxed breakfast items and a lot of cereals. It's everywhere. And if you remember, a lot of those refined carbohydrates do have added sugars and other concerning ingredients. So it's very possible that it's not the gluten causing the problem, but if you're over consuming those refined carbs, that could be worsening inflammation or arthritis or pain in your body. And you might find that when you cut back or eliminate those, you feel better. It may be from reducing the refined carbohydrates and gluten specifically, but either way, that reduction will be beneficial.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
And moving into the next one. So what does omega-3 ALA mean? Is this a good fact?
Another good question. So ALA is a type of omega-3 fatty acid. When it comes to fats, we have all these categories. So we have saturated and unsaturated. Within our unsaturated fats, we have monounsaturated and we have polyunsaturated. Within our polyunsaturated fats, we have omega-3s, we have omega-6s, and within those, we have different specific fatty acids. So ALA is alpha-linoleic acid. ALA is a plant source of omega-3s. So you hear about omega-3s a lot. You'll see in like the fish oil supplements, they talk about having omega-3s, and that's from usually a marine source. So the marine source would be like the ones we get from salmon, and that's EPA and DHA. Excellent sources. ALA is one of the plant sources. So foods like flaxseed, chia seeds, walnuts, avocado, all of those good nuts and seeds, those are sources of ALA or plant sources of omega-3s. And yes, it is a fantastic fat.
Thank you. And the next question comes to us about cheese. So the colors of cheese, so yellow and white that we're typically used to seeing in the stores, is there any difference or what's going on with the color of cheese?
Brenda, I am not a cheese expert. I will be honest. So the only insight I can really offer is, because even yellow and white, we have so many different kinds. So for example, the yellow cheese that often is thought of as American cheese or sliced cheese, that's obviously a much more processed form of cheese, sometimes not even technically cheese. I would suggest avoiding that one. When it comes to white cheese, that could be anything from mozzarella to feta cheese. Yellow cheese could be a true cheddar cheese. As far as I am aware, and like I said, I'm not an expert, I probably need to be educated in this area. I do not think those kinds of cheese, feta, Swiss, cheddar, that the color matters, or I don't think color enhancement is common. When it comes to cheese, I would just say moderation. It's certainly not an anti-inflammatory food, but cheese adds a lot of flavor. It does add some protein. So I think it's perfectly fine to have it as long as we're not overdoing it. That's all I have for you about the colors of cheese.
Thank you.
But I am going to look into this. Now I'm curious.
In general, yes, the avoiding processed foods and cheeses in general, I think is just a great way to look at that. And, the color being
I would say use it as a flavor enhancer in smaller amounts.
Perfect. And Chuck had mentioned, which I know you brought up, silver sneakers. So silver sneakers is a great way to get started with an exercise healthy lifestyle regimen for older adults who might have that benefit on their insurance. They offer beyond that. So a lot of the local YMCAs, there's silver sneakers classes, and they have a variety of things, health related topics, exercise. And then Chuck was mentioning the AHEC, so the Area Health Education Center. And usually every larger metropolitan area has one. So if you're not in the North Florida area with us today, it might be that there's an AHEC close to where you live. And a lot of them will have specific programs related to seniors as well, so that you can be with kind of a cohort of people that are your age, but also just on topics that are relevant to you. So healthy eating, exercise, diabetes. So those are great resources. We'll provide links to those in addition to some of the questions that were brought up today about recipes and maybe where to get started for exercise for arthritis, or if you do have some of those kinds of sensitivities, we'll provide those in the email. But I don't see any other further questions, but I had a couple that I would like to bring up that I think will be to the benefit of everyone. So a big question with a dietary or nutrition change would be, how do you recommend someone get started? If this all seems kind of overwhelming, where's a good place to start? What do you typically recommend to your clients?
It's a great question. Not just a plug for myself, but I will just acknowledge that it can be very difficult. So I would say if you have access through your insurance plan or another form to a registered dietitian, it can be a very helpful way to take all of this information and break it down into some actionable steps. If you do not have access to that, then I would say start where the easiest change is. So we've covered a lot of information today. I would go through and review the webinar, and I would think about your habits, the foods you like, the foods that you know you should be eating more of, and maybe the foods that you are currently eating that we discussed cutting back on. And I would go through and I would think, which is the easiest change? And what I mean by that is I may have clients who love soda and they know soda is not good for them. We know that it promotes inflammation, but for them, it is a high value, high priority item. And to give that up or make that change is going to come at a significant cost to them. There may be 5 other changes: adding more vegetables to dinner, swapping out their chips or cookies as a snack for nuts and a piece of fruit, fill in the blank, walking every day. There may be 5 other changes that they think, oh yeah, that's no big deal. I can do that easily. That is where I would start. When we talk about successful change and goal setting, you'll often hear something called SMART goals. And you can Google that if you want to, but SMART stands for a few things like specific, measurable, and the R later on is realistic. And so sometimes when we try to make change, we think we need to come at it with this all or nothing intense attitude and change 10 things at once and go from 5 sodas a day to no soda, from a normal diet to no carbs. And I'll just be honest, those drastic changes are very rarely sustainable. And when we're trying to work toward a healthy lifestyle, it has to be sustainable. So I would say pick 1 or 2 things that feel doable to you, implement those changes. As they become habits, focus on the next thing. And remember that we're just looking for improvement. So I'm stuck on the soda example right now for some reason, but let's just use it again. Let's say you're drinking 3 or 4 sodas a day. It is success if you cut from 4 to 3. And if in another week you cut from 3 to 2, and even if all we ever do is get you down to 1 soda a day or from 1 bottle down to 1 can, that is still huge improvement and you will have benefit from that change. So focus on improvement, not perfection, couple changes at a time. And if you are looking for information, as Natalie has shared, just make sure we're getting it from reputable sources if you're not meeting with a healthcare professional. So established websites, because there's a lot of misinformation on the internet that can really lead us astray.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that will be helpful for everyone. In the meantime, we had another question that was submitted by Cheryl Ann. So she asks about fruit, and I know this probably is a question on a lot of people's minds. So the natural sugars, is eating too much fruit a problem, or are there certain types of fruit that we should look at? Let's talk about fruit.
Yeah, great question. So one caveat would be other medical history. So I mentioned this in the presentation, but if you are an individual who has any blood sugar imbalances, if you've been diagnosed with diabetes, then we are going to talk about fruit a little bit differently because of the natural sugars that it does contain. For the average person without diabetes, generally healthy, I would maybe even say, then I am much less concerned with the specifics of your fruit intake. It is certainly possible to overdo it, but I would say for that person, 2 to 3 servings of fruit a day is okay. Think about the kind of fruit we're choosing, not so much in specific types, but in the form of fruit. So I'm always going to recommend whole fruit, fresh or frozen fruits over like fruit products, fruit leathers, even like fruited drinks or smoothies or dried fruits, as those can be much higher in sugar and added sugar. So it doesn't mean you can never have them, but I would say for the most part, choose fresh or frozen fruits, 2 to 3 servings a day. And just keep in mind that even if eating 2 or 3 servings of fruit, it does provide natural sugar to the body. It's also providing fiber and micronutrients that your body needs. Whereas a lot of our other carb sources, again, the cookies, the granola bars, some of those items are providing a lot more added sugar with a lot fewer nutritional benefits. I do recommend avoiding fruit juice for the most part. Much better to eat the whole fruit with fiber intact than to be drinking fruit juices. And the type of fruit, if you are trying to choose the most nutrient dense fruits, I would look for your higher fiber fruits. Those will typically be most berries. Apples are pretty high fiber. Pears are actually pretty high fiber as well. Mango, banana, pineapple are some of our sweeter fruits, but again, that doesn't mean you can't eat them. It might just mean the portion is a little bit smaller when you do.
Thank you. I think that covers that one well. And talking about the ways that you can eat fruits and vegetables, freezing. So if you are buying frozen fruits or vegetables, does that do anything? Does that change the quality or the nutrition?
It does not. So that is one of the reasons frozen fruits and vegetables are so fantastic. Texture can be a little bit different, especially with the vegetables. But if you like frozen fruits and vegetables, the process of freezing now is usually flash freezing, which preserves the nutrients as that fruit had them when it was fresh. Only thing I'll mention there, and this doesn't happen as much with fruits as with vegetables, is with the frozen vegetables, I would say choose the plain frozen vegetables to maintain the most benefit. A lot of the sauced or cheesed flavored frozen vegetables, if you look at the label, you're going to get back into seeing a lot of sodium in them, sometimes quite a bit of fat added as part of that seasoning. But plain frozen fruits or vegetables, fantastic cheat, keep for a long time, and they usually cost a little bit less.
Perfect. Thank you. And then Elizabeth has submitted one regarding fruit juices. So why no fruit juices? Why avoid fruit juices? And does this cover freshly juiced fruits and vegetables that you might make out of a juicer in your home?
Good question. I'm going to kind of unpack that in steps. So one, my recommendation against fruit juices is just a general recommendation. Typically, the kinds of fruit juices that individuals are choosing usually do have some sugar added to them or are from concentrate, and they do provide sugar and calories to the diet, which most of us are getting too much of. So that's a general recommendation, to be clear. I'm not saying that if I had a certain individual in front of me, I would tell them I don't tell anyone that they can never have anything. But fruit juice is something that I would say I recommend fruit over fruit juice, to be clear. And I just think we get more fiber and more benefits from those. Now, the question of, does it apply to kind of at-home juicing? Yes and no. So when you're making your own juices at home using fruits and vegetables, that certainly can be a great way to get in a lot of micronutrients, vitamins and minerals that we have in those fruits and vegetables. I'm a fan of that. I would suggest, if you're doing it, that we use a form of processing that is more like blending than juicing. And this is because it depends on the juicer, but a lot of juicers withhold essentially the pulp, which is where most of the fiber is for fruits and vegetables. Again, you're still getting micronutrients, but you're not getting the fiber, which is a key nutrient. Now, if we're talking about blending fruits and vegetables, whether to just make a juice to drink or to use it in some form of a smoothie as a meal or a snack, I actually am a huge proponent of that, but I recommend that we're blending the whole fruit and vegetable. And then that's a little bit of another conversation as far as how to make sure a smoothie is nutritionally balanced if we're using it for a meal or a snack, or if you're just drinking it as a way to get in more fruits and vegetables. So a little bit individualized there, but if they're being blended, then I think that can be a great option. So speaking more to the conventional fruit juices in that initial statement.
Thank you. I think that helps to clarify that. And then this next one is about herbs. So are there any herbs that are associated with anti-inflammatory properties or that can help with inflammation?
Yes. Lots of benefit to different herbs, but I would say the most notable ones for anti-inflammatory benefits would be ginger, turmeric, cinnamon, and garlic. And those work fantastically in all different kinds of things. I probably don't need to say it, but with anything like garlic, of course, we're talking about the garlic powder, not like garlic salt. We don't want the added sodium or salt in there, but garlic, cinnamon, turmeric, and what was the other one I just said, Natalie? I gave you a fourth.
Garlic.
Ginger. Yes, that's it.
Ginger.
There we go. Yes, I would say it's a great place to start. Thank you. I saw it on the chat.
Yes. Yeah, ginger I think is really great. As long as you can stomach it, it's very spicy. And then I think this is referring to some of the processed types of products, but Caroline's asking about these gluten-free type of products having, what seems to be a lot of extra salt. And generally, is that kind of a condition that comes with gluten-free diets, or is that specific to these processed type of items, like maybe the gluten-free pastas and things like that you might be trying to add in?
Yes. So this is one of the reasons that the gluten-free diet is not inherently healthy. If I'm helping someone implement a gluten-free diet initially, or the original intent would be that we remove some of these sources of gluten and we focus on other whole foods. Maybe we use gluten-free oats. Maybe we use other grains like brown rice or quinoa in place of that flour, right? So initially it should have been much of a less processed diet. However, food industry is always going to be about making money. And so as the gluten-free diet became more popular over the past 10 to 15 years, we really started to see all of these gluten-free items emerge. The intent of providing alternatives is great, but if you remember in the presentation, I said, similar to a lot of our fat-free or sugar-free products, the food industry, when they take something out, they put something else in to maintain quality. And that is why many of these gluten-free items are not inherently healthier. They don't always have more fiber. A lot of times they do have more sodium or other enhancers added to try and make them palatable. So just because something says gluten-free does not make it a healthy choice. It's really just marketing by the food industry. And I'm happy to clarify more if that doesn't fully answer the question, but your observation is absolutely correct. And I would say, no, that does not just have to go along with the gluten-free diet. It's very possible to follow a very healthy gluten-free diet, but the recommendation to keep avoiding those processed foods still stands, whether they're gluten-free or conventional.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And if there are no additional questions, we can go ahead and just start our wrap up. So just a general thank you to everyone who's been able to join us today. So our presenter, Kayla Fisher, again with UF Health Jacksonville, and our AI-PAMI team. We just want to say thank you to everyone. We hope you found this to be of value. We will send out a follow-up email to everyone that contains the recording, a lot of these links and resources that we've talked about. We'll just point out to everyone where the Q&A begins so that you can benefit from this portion of things. And also, if you have any follow-up questions or anything like that, you are more than welcome to send it to my email address. I've been emailing all of you, and I will email you again so you'll have that and you can respond to me. I can pass anything along. And it does look like we had one more come in that you teased earlier about coconut oil, if you want to end on the coconut oil question.
Happy to. So I'll keep it fairly brief. My answer is a little unsatisfactory. So coconut oil, the research is pretty controversial, meaning, and this is good to remember anytime we're reading nutrition information, you can interpret research in a lot of ways, so it's very easy to make it say what you want it to say. Coconut oil is a very unique oil in this debate for a few reasons. So typically, I have to give you the background, typically when we talk about unsaturated versus saturated, the unsaturated fats are the healthy fats. Unsaturated fats are typically found in plant foods. That's why olive oil, vegetable oils, nuts, and seeds have a lot of these unsaturated fats. So we think of it as our plant food fat. Saturated fats, we don't want too many of in the diet, and they do typically come from our animal fats. So red meat, whole milk, cheeses, the kind of fat they have is usually saturated. Coconut is a very interesting food in that coconut is obviously a plant food, but coconut as a tropical or palm oil is in the predominantly saturated category. This is why coconut oil is solid at room temperature, if you've ever seen it, just like butter. Whereas our unsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature. So coconut is very unique. Now, because it is higher in saturated fats, I would say that's something to be cautious of. So if you are someone with certain cardiovascular conditions and we're trying to limit your saturated fat or decrease cholesterol, I would be much more cautious about coconut oil. As I said earlier, the research is there for olive oil. It's the safer bet. However, the type of fatty acid that's in coconut oil is a specific one that has been linked to some health benefits in research. And that's where you'll see individuals suggesting it. It is a less processed oil than a lot of the vegetable oils and soybean oils that, as I mentioned earlier, have the omega-6 fatty acids, which we want to be cautious of because those oils are just in everything now. Cereals, granola bars, anything you buy, it's in everything. So I would put coconut oil somewhere in the middle. And I'll be honest, even personally, that's kind of how I operate. I use olive oil the most. I recommend it the most. I think it's the clearest recommendation. I encourage you to stay away from a lot of the vegetable oil, soybean oil, processed super cheap vegetable oils, because I think the research is clear that they are pro-inflammatory. I'd put coconut oil in the middle. Sometimes it adds a great flavor. If you're trying to replace, butter or vegetable oil, I think it's appropriate, but I wouldn't go all out on coconut oil yet, meaning I would not use it as your only oil or fat. But there are times that it works well. It does have a higher smoke point, I should mention as well. So if it's a recipe that olive oil is not going to work for, and you're trying to find something else, coconut oil could be a good alternative. But I would say, be moderate. And I think over the next couple of years, because it takes a long time for research to come out and be done, I think over the next few years, we'll have a little more clarity there.
Thank you. We've had a few questions that were submitted, but because we're at our time today, we'll go ahead and answer those couple of questions via email. So don't worry if you've submitted something here at the end. We're going to go ahead and send out some links and information. So look out for that email. It'll have some of these different resources from the Q&A that's been brought up today. But again, we want to thank you and our presenter, Kayla, and we'll let everyone go for the afternoon and we'll get that email sent out shortly.